She raised her voice in the lobby as neighbors stared at their shoes. "You cannot keep living like a stray, Alden," my daughter said, using my first name like I was a tenant who owed her money. Her husband, tall and silent, folded his arms and watched me the way a landlord watches a leaky pipe. My cheeks burned, not from anger first, but from the shame that comes when the person you love chooses to embarrass you in public. People slowed as they passed, catching words like pills rolling across a floor, and I wished the ground would open and swallow me whole. My name is Alden Pierce, 68, retired bus mechanic, proud keeper of a lifetime of calloused hands. I raised one child on sandwich bread and secondhand dreams after her mother left us, a girl I named Linnea because the name sounded like a small bell. We lived in a one-bedroom flat near the Ship Canal in Milwaukee, and I learned to braid hair from a pamphlet the school nurse gave me. Linnea grew, and so did my hours. I took night shifts and learned to sleep in the corridor between the break room and the broom closet. We shared cocoa on Christmas nights with the television glow painting our faces blue. Her laugh kept me upright when the world wanted me to sit down. I believed love was a house that never lost heat. I was wrong. Now Linnea lived in this polished riverside tower with her husband, Whitaker, and a marble lobby that smelled like lemon water and money. I had moved into a small studio on the 6th floor after she told me the nursing home she chose felt more appropriate than my old walk-up. The nursing home had rules about visiting hours and medication reminders I did not need. A studio near my daughter felt like a compromise my pride could accept. Linnea said it would keep me close, and then she stopped answering my texts after 9 at night. Whitaker managed their calendar like a security guard. He asked me to call ahead to see if I could come up. He did not say please, and he did not look at me when he said it. He looked at Linnea, as if the words were a gift he had wrapped for her. "You cannot keep missing your doctor appointments," Linnea said. "Although I had missed one, not two. You confused the staff. You turned off the stove last week without cooking anything, then forgot and turned it on again." She delivered each line like a script written by someone who had never met me. I opened my mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. There is a kind of argument that is not an argument at all. It is a decision arriving with a smile. I told her I had turned the stove on to check the flame height, since the pilot light sounded wrong. She waved her hand like a tired conductor, and the music of my explanation died before the first note. The elevator dinged. Residents flowed around us, yoga mats and shopping bags brushing my sleeves. My neighbor stepped out, a quiet man with a trimmed gray beard and the posture of a librarian. His name was Marius, and he had once lent me his soldering iron when I fixed a loose wire in my radio. He held the newspaper in one hand and a small grocery bag in the other. As he passed, his eyes flicked to me, and something moved behind them, like a shadow that wanted to speak. He stepped into my personal space for a heartbeat and pressed a folded receipt into my palm with the same ease a friend might use to steady you in a crowd. His hand was dry and firm, and then it was gone. The paper felt warm. I did not open it. I followed Linnea and Whitaker into the elevator, standing near the control panel like a student who had arrived late to class. Linnea kept talking about memory tests and driver's license renewals. Whitaker nodded in the rhythm of a metronome. My ears started to buzz softly, the way they used to when the bus engine vibrated against my ribs. I slid my thumb over the receipt and felt the groove where ink had dried. The car stopped at the 3rd floor, took on 2 teenagers with skateboards and laughter, and started again. I thought about the first skateboard I bought Linnea, purple with silver wheels. I taught her to fall on her side instead of her wrists. She learned to get up before the pain arrived. The doors opened on 6. I stepped out with them, then leaned back toward the seam before it closed and flicked the receipt open with my thumb. The letters were cramped, written with the careful panic of someone who wants to be neat but cannot afford time. "Get out of here if you want to live." I looked up, mouth open, and saw only my reflection on the bright steel. I turned to the corridor. Linnea had already swiped the key fob and pushed open the fire door toward the condo wing. Whitaker walked behind her, talking about a storage unit and the cost of movers. I did not know whether to laugh or to run. The note felt like a prank you do not tell old men. My heart decided to beat faster anyway. I called after them. I left something in the lobby. Linnea looked over her shoulder and gave me a small shrug. That shrug was a lifetime of reports signed without reading, field trip forms delivered late, Father's Day crafts that smelled like glue, and I took it with me as I turned back toward the lift. The corridor was quiet, soft carpet swallowing my steps. I pressed the call button and watched the numbers climb and glow and settle. The doors opened. The car was empty. I held the note again, turning it over as if a second message might appear. The back was blank, only a faint ring of grease where a coffee cup had rested. Neighbors say fear sharpens the mind. Mine went the other way at first. I thought about the time the furnace in our old building blew soot into the hallway because the chimney cap had come loose. I thought about the bus with brakes that grabbed a beat late and the way my supervisor told me to put a sign on the dashboard and not drive it down the hill. I thought about Marius, his neat beard, the soldering iron, the way his eyes had said, "Listen to me," without saying anything at all. The note was a rope dropped from a balcony. Pride told me to watch it sway. Love for my daughter told me to tie it around my waist and pull. I took the stairs. My knees popped like old knuckles and my breath found its slow rhythm. I reached the ground floor and stepped into a lobby that had changed its face. Security guards whispered near the desk. A siren far away started as a thin line and widened until it filled the windows with a moving blue. The building manager, a woman named Karis with clipboards for hands, walked fast toward the service door. She did not see me. The florist kiosk shut its shutters with a sound like a cymbal. A man in a suit asked no one, "Do you smell gas?" I did not, and then I did, a faint sweet note hiding behind lemon and money. I reached the street and felt cold air fold around my chest. People had drifted out from the cafe and stood with their mugs cupped, watching the entrance the way parishioners watched the church door before a wedding. I turned my face up to the sixth-floor windows, the ones that lined the hallway to Linnea's wing. The glass looked the same, perfect and dumb. 10 minutes is a long time when you have been told to leave in order to live. It stretches like a rubber band, and you do not feel it until it snaps against your skin. I put both hands on the railing and tried to summon every birthday, every spelling bee, every night she spent asleep with a fever while I sat and counted the seconds between each breath. A father is a clock that does not want to stop. A patrol car slid to the curb. A fire engine moaned around the corner and ate the distance between us and the next intersection. The first burst of wind from its arrival carried a stronger scent of gas that curled into my nose and stayed. Karis came out with a radio and looked up. She pressed a button and said something that made the guard at the desk go still. I did not hear the words. My mind had filled with a map of this building that clicked into place without asking me. The gas line in the basement ran under the cafe, then under the boiler room, then up the shafts. Marius knew something I did not. Marius had told me to leave. Whitaker's voice called my name behind me. He had followed, linen shirt open at the throat, phone in his hand as if it were a badge. Linnea was not at his side. My stomach folded. He reached me and stopped, breathless, eyes sharper than I had ever seen them. "Where is Linnea?" "Alden," he asked, as if the syllables were against his will. I looked at his mouth moving and thought that a son-in-law can become a son if both men agree to lay down their sticks. He had not agreed, and neither had I. My answer did not matter. An alarm inside the building finally woke up and began to cry. The sound ran up the walls and into the street, and people on the pavement took a step back in one motion, like a tide pulled by a hidden moon. I turned to run, and a hand caught my elbow. The guard waved me toward the far lot. "Sir, please," he said. "Over there." My legs wanted both directions, up into the hazard and out into the cold. A father learns a special kind of dividing that school never teaches. Half of me had already climbed the stairs in my mind. The other half did not want to make Linnea a ghost. I looked down at the note again. "Get out of here if you want to live." It glared at me in Marius's small, careful script. 10 minutes had nearly passed. The fire engine's crew jumped down and pulled lengths of hose like serpents from a crate. A firefighter shouted to the manager. The words, "Evacuate upper floors," snapped in the air. A window on 6 flashed with a light I did not recognize at first, a brief orange cough. It vanished, then returned, brighter and hungrier, and an ugly sound came with it, like a giant tearing cloth. People shouted. A dog began to bark in helpless loops. The firefighter raised his arm and pointed. I read the shape of that fire through the glass, as if it were a letter posted in my name. My daughter was somewhere behind that corridor, or already on a stairwell with strangers, or caught by a door that stuck when it was hot. I gripped the railing until my fingers ached and the sky tilted. The engine's horn blasted. The building exhaled a thin plume of smoke at the roofline. The alarm wailed at a higher pitch. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out with hands that did not feel like mine. A message from an unknown number bloomed on the screen. It was not unknown. It was Marius. One line, as neat as his beard. Do not go back inside. There is more you need to know. Sirens bounced off the glass towers and echoed through the street like a warning that had arrived too late. Firefighters shouted to one another, their boots striking the pavement in fast, rhythmic thuds. Smoke curled up from the sixth-floor windows, not thick yet, but enough to turn the afternoon air gray. Alden's breath came out in short bursts. His knees trembled, and the sound of the alarm pressed against his ribs. He searched every window, waiting for Linnea's face to appear. None did. Whitaker stood beside him, clutching his phone, calling her name again and again, his voice cracking like a radio losing signal. Alden felt anger push through the fear. He wanted to grab him, to ask why Linnea had not been warned, why Marius had sent the message to him instead of to her. He wanted to scream that he had told them the gas smell was strange. Yet no sound came out. Firefighters rushed past with hoses and axes. One of them shouted, "We've got residents trapped on 6. The words cracked open Alden's chest. He tried to move forward, but the guard blocked him again. "Sir, please stay back." The guard's hand was firm, and his eyes carried the professional sympathy of someone used to stopping desperate people. Alden's voice returned in a rasp. "My daughter is in there. Everyone's being brought out," the guard said quickly, the line rehearsed. "Please, let them work." Alden's mind clung to the last thing Marius had written. "There is more you need to know." That phrase hung in his head like a riddle carved into stone. The fire ate its way along the 6th floor, but not fast enough to hide the truth that something worse had begun long before the flames. Minutes passed like hours. Then, from the side entrance, 2 firefighters emerged carrying a woman in a gray dress. Her face was covered in soot. Alden's heart leapt and fell again. It was not Linnea. He gripped the railing until his knuckles went white. Smoke rolled higher, thicker, darker. The second wave of rescuers disappeared into the doorway. At last, a stretcher appeared. A paramedic shouted for clear space. Whitaker ran forward. Alden followed, pushing through the circle of onlookers. A woman lay on the stretcher, eyes closed, her hair tangled with ash. Linnea. Her skin looked pale against the oxygen mask. Alden stopped breathing. "She's alive," the paramedic said, catching his expression. "Smoke inhalation, but pulse is steady." Alden's knees weakened with relief. Whitaker stumbled after the stretcher as they loaded her into the ambulance. Alden followed, but the medic raised a hand. "Family only," she said, not knowing who he was. Whitaker climbed in without looking back. The doors closed, and the siren screamed into the distance. When the sound faded, Alden stood on the pavement, surrounded by strangers who had already turned their attention elsewhere. He stared at the building, now scarred with blackened windows. Then he remembered his phone. Marius's message still glowed on the screen. "Do not go back inside. There is more you need to know." Alden looked around for Marius. The police had cordoned off the entrance, but he spotted the old man standing at the corner, half hidden by the shadow of a lamppost. Marius's eyes met his. He made a small gesture, a tilt of the head, inviting him to follow, and then turned down a side street. Alden hesitated. His heart told him to go to the hospital. His instincts whispered that the fire was no accident. He folded the note back into his pocket and walked after Marius. The alley smelled of wet cement and smoke. Marius waited by the door of a service building, his face drawn tight. "You made it out," he said quietly. "Good." Alden's voice trembled. "What is going on?" "My daughter, she's hurt." Marius nodded once. "I know, and I'm sorry, but you need to listen before you go anywhere near her again." Alden frowned, the anger simmering just beneath his grief. "You'd better start talking." Marius looked over his shoulder, lowering his voice. "That fire wasn't an accident, Alden. It was meant to look like one. And it wasn't you they were trying to save." Alden blinked. "What are you saying?" "The explosion was triggered from inside the condo," Marius whispered. "The gas line was tampered with. But someone called in the leak early, an anonymous report. That's why the fire crews came so fast. Someone wanted you to leave the building before it happened." Alden's stomach tightened. "Before it happened? Why me?" Marius hesitated, then took out his phone. "Because of what Linnea and Whitaker have been doing. You don't know half of it. And if you go to the hospital right now, They'll make sure you never find out. The words hit Alden harder than the smoke had. He stared at Marius, his pulse hammering in his temples. You're saying my daughter, was involved in this? Marius's eyes softened. Not in the way you think. But she's caught in something dangerous. You're the one person who can still stop it. That's why I warned you. Alden looked at the man's trembling hands and the weight behind his words. The world felt suddenly unstable, like the ground beneath him had shifted. The sirens were distant now, replaced by the low hum of city traffic. He turned toward the glowing skyline, torn between the hospital and the truth waiting in Marius's next sentence. Then tell me everything, he said. From the beginning. Marius glanced toward the smoke still curling above the tower and shook his head. Not here. They're already watching. Come with me, Alden. If you want to know what really happened to your daughter and what she's hiding, you'll have to trust me. Alden followed his gaze. Across the street, a black SUV idled with its headlights off. Two silhouettes sat inside, unmoving. His pulse quickened. Marius stepped closer. You were never supposed to survive that fire. Alden's breath caught. What do you mean, never supposed to? Marius's expression turned grim. Because, Alden, someone wanted you gone before tomorrow morning. And it isn't just about the fire. It's about your name, your inheritance, your house, everything you worked your whole life for. The air felt colder suddenly. Alden's mind reeled as his heart sank. He thought of Linnea's strained voice, Whitaker's cold eyes, the polite eviction from his old home. None of it had been random. Marius opened the door to the service building. Come inside. I'll show you why your daughter betrayed you, and why she might be the only one you can still save. Alden stared into the darkness beyond the door, torn between fear and the faint, painful hope that this was all some cruel mistake. Then he stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft metallic click. The stairwell smelled of old paint and dust. A single bulb flickered overhead, throwing Marius's face into shifting planes of light and shadow. Alden followed him down 2 flights until they reached a narrow hallway. Pipes lined the ceiling, dripping faintly onto the cracked concrete floor. At the end of the hall was a small maintenance room. Its metal door marked Storage C. Marius unlocked it with a trembling hand and gestured for Alden to step inside. The room was small, barely wide enough for both men to stand without touching. A desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers, a rusted fan, and a small radio. Marius closed the door quietly and turned to face him. I work for the city gas department, he said. I'm supposed to inspect pipelines, maintenance valves, and pressure readings. But lately, I've been tracking unusual access to private building systems, especially in this complex. Someone was rerouting lines, adjusting safety settings remotely. At first, I thought it was a faulty control server. Then I saw the authorization code used. Alden's hands tightened into fists. You're saying someone inside the building did this? Marius nodded slowly. Someone with clearance. And when I traced the signature file, it matched an account linked to your daughter's name. Alden blinked. That's impossible. I wanted to believe that, Marius said, his voice low but steady. So I checked twice. Then I realized the code wasn't hers exactly. It was a secondary account attached to her property records, which means someone used her identity, probably without her knowing, to access the gas system. Alden exhaled, trying to make sense of the words. So you think Whitaker used Linnea's name? Marius nodded. It fits his background. Real estate investments, renovation companies, half of them under shell names. I saw his name come up on another report a few months ago, tied to an insurance claim after an apartment fire in Detroit. The old man's pulse thudded in his ears. You're saying this was about insurance? It's about money, Marius said grimly. And ownership. Whitaker's company has been quietly buying damaged properties through third parties. Fires, gas leaks, floods, they all make a building worthless until someone rescues it at a discount. This tower is part of that pattern. But they couldn't touch your daughter's unit unless she agreed, or unless something happened to you first. Alden frowned. To me? Why would that matter? Marius pulled a folder from a drawer and dropped it onto the desk. Because of the inheritance clause. When you sold your house 3 years ago, you left part of the profit in a trust. That money was protected under your name. If anything happened to you, Linnea, and by marriage, Whitaker, would gain control of the remainder. The clause activates after a catastrophic loss of next of kin. The words hit like a hammer. Alden staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. Are you saying they, Whitaker, planned to kill me? Marius's gaze did not waver. I'm saying the fire was designed to look like a gas malfunction in your unit. You were supposed to be inside when it happened. The air felt heavy, the walls too close. Alden rubbed his temples, trying to push back the rising tide of disbelief. Linnea's voice echoed in his mind. The scolding, the appointments, the insistence that he move closer. Every gesture had seemed caring at the time. Had it all been preparation? Marius continued, his voice soft but urgent. When I realized what the pattern meant, I filed an internal report. It disappeared within hours. Then my supervisor told me to drop it. That's when I started watching the security feeds. I saw Whitaker visiting the maintenance floor 2 nights ago, using your daughter's access code. Alden's throat went dry. Does Linnea know? I don't think so, Marius said. But she's part of the cover-up now, whether she knows it or not. The emergency call to the fire department came from her phone. She may have realized what was happening too late. Alden sank into the metal chair by the desk. His hands trembled as he stared at the dusty floor. He thought of Linnea at 5 years old, clutching his hand on her first day of school. He thought of the way she had cried when her mother left, the way he had promised she would never be alone again. And now, the world had twisted that promise into something unrecognizable. Marius reached into his pocket and slid a USB drive across the desk. Everything is on here. System logs, timestamps, access codes. I backed it up before they could wipe the records. Alden looked at it, but did not touch it. Why give this to me? Because I can't go public, Marius said. They know I've been watching. I've already been suspended once. If I vanish, nobody will look twice. But you have a reason to fight. You have a story people will listen to. Alden shook his head slowly. I'm not a fighter anymore. I'm an old man with arthritis and a daughter in the hospital. Marius leaned closer. You're a father. And the truth is the only weapon you have left. Silence stretched between them. The old desk fan clicked once, then stopped spinning. Alden reached for the USB drive and held it in his palm. It was small, almost weightless, yet it felt heavier than the years that had brought him here. What do I do with this? He asked quietly. Go to the police if you trust them, Marius said. But do it carefully. Whitaker has friends in the city planning office. If the wrong person gets wind of this, they'll bury it before sunrise. You need someone clean, someone outside the loop. Alden nodded, tucking the drive into his pocket. I'll figure it out. Marius's voice dropped to a whisper. And one more thing. If you go to the hospital, act like you don't know anything. They might be watching her room. Whitaker will try to play the grieving husband. Don't let him see the truth in your eyes. Alden stood slowly. What about you? I'll disappear for a while, Marius said, pulling on his coat. If I find anything else, I'll reach out. He paused at the door, turning back once. You loved your daughter enough to raise her alone. Love her enough now to save her from the man she married. Then he slipped out into the hallway, leaving Alden alone with the humming silence. Alden sat there for a long time, listening to the faint drip of water from the pipes above. His hands ached, his heart heavier than it had ever been. The USB drive pressed against his leg like a secret trying to speak. He thought of Linnea lying in the hospital, unaware of the storm that surrounded her. He thought of Whitaker's calm face, the way he had watched the fire as if waiting for something to finish. Alden rose, straightened his back, and walked toward the door. He did not yet know how he would do it, but one thing had become clear. The man who had spent his life fixing broken engines was about to learn how to fix something far more dangerous, truth itself. As he stepped out into the night, his phone buzzed again. A new message appeared from an unknown number. They know you have the file. Don't go home. The rain began as a whisper, soft against the cracked pavement, then grew heavy, drumming on the hood of every passing car. Alden walked quickly beneath the flickering streetlights, his jacket soaked through, his thoughts tangled. The message on his phone replayed in his mind like a broken record. They know you have the file. Don't go home. He needed to see Linnea. Whatever Marius believed, Alden refused to accept that his daughter was part of this madness. If Whitaker had dragged her into something dangerous, she might be just as much a victim as he was. The hospital was 12 blocks away. Each step felt slower than the last, his body heavy but his purpose sharper than it had been in years. By the time he reached the glass doors of Mercy General, dawn had begun to scrape the horizon with pale light. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and weak coffee. He paused to wipe the rain from his face, then approached the reception desk. The nurse, a young woman with tired eyes, looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" "My daughter," Alden said, his voice trembling from both cold and fear. "Linnea Pierce Whitaker. She was brought in last night after the fire." The nurse tapped her keyboard. "She's in the ICU, room 306. Visiting hours start at 7. But since you're family, I can let you in early. She's stable, but still unconscious." Relief passed through him like a slow wave. "Thank you." He took the elevator, his reflection staring back at him in the metal doors, eyes lined with exhaustion, lips pressed thin, hair silver and damp. When the doors opened, the corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and machine oil. Nurses moved quietly between rooms, their shoes whispering against the polished floor. Room 306. Linnea lay on the bed, her skin pale against the white sheets, a tube resting under her nose. Machines blinked gently beside her, steady, rhythmic, almost comforting. Her hand, wrapped in a light bandage, rested by her side. Alden approached slowly and sat in the chair beside her. He reached out and touched her fingers. "I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered, but she did not wake. He stayed like that for several minutes, just watching her breathe, listening to the soft hiss of oxygen. Memories crept in. The nights she'd fallen asleep on his chest while he watched the late news, the afternoons they spent fixing her old bicycle, the quiet laughter when she told him he was her hero. Those moments felt like pieces of another life. The door clicked open behind him. Whitaker stepped in, his shirt neatly pressed, his expression carefully composed. "Alden," he said, his tone polite but edged. "You made it." Alden rose slowly. "How is she?" "The doctors say she'll recover," Whitaker replied. He set a small paper cup of coffee on the counter and leaned against the wall. "They think she fainted from the smoke before she could reach the stairs." Alden nodded, his jaw tightening. "She's lucky." Whitaker studied him for a moment, then said, "You shouldn't have gone back to that building. It's a miracle you're alive." "I had help," Alden said evenly. "Someone warned me." Whitaker's eyebrow twitched. "Oh, a neighbor. Marius. You know him?" Whitaker's lips curved slightly, but the smile never reached his eyes. "The one with the beard? Maintenance type?" "Can't say I do." Alden watched him closely. He seemed to know a lot about the gas lines. Whitaker shrugged. "The city will figure out what went wrong. These old systems fail all the time." Alden let the silence stretch, then said, "Strange how it happened right under Linnea's unit." Whitaker met his gaze. His tone softened, but there was something cold beneath it. "It's best not to overthink it, Alden. The important thing is that she's alive. And you're alive." He paused. "Accidents happen." The way he said it made Alden's skin crawl. He forced himself to remain calm. "Yes," he said slowly. "Accidents happen." Whitaker's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening for a fraction of a second before he slipped the device back into his pocket. "I have to make a few calls. Insurance, contractors, that sort of thing. You'll stay here with her?" "I will." "Good." Whitaker hesitated at the door, his tone light again. "Try to get some rest, Alden. You've had quite a night." When he was gone, the room felt heavier. Alden looked down at Linnea again. "What has he done to you, sweetheart?" he whispered. He reached into his pocket and felt the cold shape of the USB drive. His thumb traced the edge of it. He had no idea how much time he had before whoever sent that warning message found him. He needed to act fast. The nurse entered briefly to adjust Linnea's for. Alden waited until she left, then stood and pulled a visitor's notebook from the counter. On the last page, he wrote 3 words. "Forgive me, Linnea." He tucked the note under her hand, then turned to leave. At the elevator, he opened his phone. A new text appeared from an unknown number. "You're not safe there either. They've traced the drive." A chill ran through him. He looked up and noticed a man in a black jacket standing near the end of the corridor, pretending to read a chart on the wall. When Alden's eyes met his, the man turned away too quickly. Alden's heart pounded. He slipped the USB drive into the lining of his coat and took the stairs instead of the lift. His steps echoed down the stairwell as he moved faster, gripping the railing for balance. The hospital lights flickered above him. Outside, the rain had stopped. A faint fog hugged the streets. Alden walked toward the bus stop, but noticed a black SUV idling across the road, the same one he had seen near the building. Its engine hummed softly. He turned and began walking in the opposite direction. His mind raced. He needed somewhere safe, somewhere no one would think to look. Then it struck him. The church at the edge of the old neighborhood, the one where Linnea had sung in the children's choir years ago. The priest there, Father Rowan, had known Alden for decades. He adjusted his collar and kept walking, the city still half asleep. Every step brought him closer to a truth he could not yet see, but his gut told him he was walking straight into the heart of it. As he reached the end of the street, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was only 4 words. They got to Marius. The church looked smaller than Alden remembered. The white paint had peeled around the edges of the windows, and the bell tower leaned ever so slightly to one side, as if bowing under the weight of too many forgotten prayers. The wooden sign out front still read St. Augustine Parish, though the gold lettering had faded to a tired brown. He stood at the gate for a moment, catching his breath. Dawn light spilled across the cracked stone steps, and the cold air carried the faint smell of wet earth and lilies from the nearby cemetery. For the first time in a long while, Alden felt the ghost of peace. He had spent years in these pews with Linnea when she was small, her soft voice whispering questions during hymns, her tiny hand clutching his calloused one. It had been a place where he believed goodness still had a home. He stepped inside. The heavy door creaked shut behind him, sealing away the noise of the city. Candles flickered along the altar, casting long shadows across the stained glass windows. Father Rowan was kneeling near the front, a man now gray and stooped, but unmistakably the same, broad-shouldered, gentle-eyed, a presence both firm and kind. He turned at the sound of footsteps, surprise softening into warmth. "Alden Pierce," he said, rising to his feet. "It has been too long." Alden tried to smile, though it faltered. "I didn't know where else to go." "Then you came to the right place," Rowan said, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "You look as though you've walked through fire." "I almost did," Alden murmured. Rowan led him to a pew near the front. "Sit, my friend. Start from the beginning." Alden hesitated, his mind searching for order among the chaos. Then he spoke. About the fire, the note from Marius, the USB drive, Whitaker's cold smile, and the messages warning him not to go home. Rowan listened without interruption, his expression tightening only when Alden mentioned the last message. They got to Marius. When Alden finished, Rowan leaned back slowly, his brows drawn together. "Do you still have the drive?" Alden nodded and pulled it from his coat pocket. "It's all here. Marius said it proves what Whitaker's been doing." Rowan took it carefully, turning it over in his hand. "If what you're saying is true, you're in real danger, Alden. People don't start fires for nothing. They erase witnesses." Alden looked down at the worn wood beneath his hands. "I just want to protect Linnea. She's all I have." Rowan's eyes softened. "Then we must think clearly. You cannot go to the police until we know which of them Whitaker controls. You'll need someone outside his reach." "Who?" Rowan thought for a moment. "There's a journalist who used to attend services here, a woman named Olivia Keene. Investigative type, works for the Milwaukee Journal-Ledger. She has a reputation for digging into corruption cases. If this evidence is real, she'll know how to handle it." Alden's heart stirred with cautious hope. "Do you know how to reach her?" "I have her card somewhere in the office," Rowan said, standing. "Wait here." Alden nodded and watched the priest walk down the side aisle, his robes brushing the floor. The church fell into silence again. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock and the soft hiss of candle flames filled the air. He leaned back against the pew, exhaustion washing over him. The weight of everything, his years of sacrifice, Linnea's betrayal, Marius's death, pressed down on him like a storm that refused to end. Yet beneath it all, a spark of resolve remained. He had survived a fire. He would survive this. The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts. He turned, expecting Father Rowan. Instead, a shadow stood in the doorway at the back of the church. The man wore a black jacket and moved with deliberate calm, his head slightly bowed, as though pretending to pray. Alden's breath caught. He recognized the silhouette, the same man from the hospital corridor. The stranger walked slowly down the center aisle, his shoes silent on the old carpet. Alden's pulse quickened. He scanned the side door near the choir benches, measuring the distance in his mind. "Mr. Pierce," the man said quietly, his voice smooth and low. "You shouldn't have come here." Alden rose, his legs trembling. "Who are you?" The man stopped a few steps away. "A friend," he said, smiling faintly. "At least, I was sent by someone who once claimed to be." "Whitaker." Alden's voice cracked with anger. The man tilted his head. You could say that. What do you want? The file, Mr. Pierce. Hand it over, and we can all walk away from this quietly. Alden shook his head. You killed Marius. The man's smile faded. Marius made choices. You don't have to make the same ones. Before Alden could speak, Father Rowan's voice rang out from behind the altar. Leave this place. The man turned sharply. Rowan stood with a metal cross in one hand, his expression calm but unyielding. This is a house of God, the priest said firmly. You've no right to enter it with threats. The stranger's eyes flicked between them, calculating. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Father. I understand sin when I see it, Rowan said. Now go. The man's jaw tightened. He took one step forward, but Rowan moved first, pressing a hidden switch beneath the pulpit. Somewhere behind the organ, a faint mechanical click echoed, followed by the sound of approaching footsteps. Two men in maintenance uniforms emerged from the side hallway, both familiar faces to Alden from the parish grounds. They carried tools, not weapons, but their stance was steady and protective. The stranger exhaled sharply, realizing he was outnumbered. This isn't over, he said, backing toward the door. You can't hide from what's coming. Nor can you, Rowan replied. The man slipped out into the morning light and vanished. Rowan crossed himself quietly before turning back to Alden. You need to leave, now? He'll return with help. Alden nodded, his voice trembling. You said Olivia Keene. Where do I find her? Rowan pulled a small card from his robe pocket, pressing it into Alden's hand. Downtown offices, corner of 9th and Howard. Tell her I sent you. Alden pocketed the card and started toward the side door. Rowan stopped him with a gentle touch on his shoulder. Alden, he said softly, when you show her that file, don't think of revenge. Think of truth. That's what will save your daughter. Alden met his eyes. I just want her to see what kind of man she married. The priest nodded. Then make sure she's still around to see it. Alden stepped out into the cold morning, his heart pounding. The city stretched before him, gray and uncertain. He turned the collar of his jacket against the wind, clutching the card in one hand and the secret of the USB drive in the other. As he reached the street corner, a police car sped past toward the church, sirens wailing. He glanced back once. Through the fog, he saw Father Rowan at the doorway, watching him leave. Then the church lights flickered, and the explosion shattered the silence. The sound tore through the morning like a beast breaking its chain. The blast rolled down the street, shaking windows, ripping shingles from nearby roofs. Alden stumbled as the shockwave struck, the air itself seeming to punch him in the chest. The ground pitched beneath him, and he fell to one knee. When he looked up, the church that had once been his refuge was burning. Flames licked up through the stained glass windows, sending shards of color spinning into the street. The steeple bell clanged once, a hollow metallic cry, then crashed through the roof with a sound that split the dawn. Smoke poured from the doors, thick and black, swallowing the place where Father Rowan had stood only moments earlier. Alden pushed himself to his feet, the pain in his leg forgotten. Father Rowan, he shouted, his voice raw. He took 3 steps toward the inferno before the heat drove him back. A crowd had begun to form. Neighbors, drivers, a few early workers, staring in stunned silence. Someone screamed for the fire department. Sirens began to wail in the distance, but Alden already knew they would arrive too late. He stood rooted on the pavement, eyes stinging, heart pounding. It was happening again. Another fire. Another warning. Marius was gone. Now Rowan too. Every person who tried to help him was being erased. He looked down at his shaking hands and realized the truth. Whoever was behind this had eyes everywhere. The card in his pocket felt suddenly alive, as though it were burning through the fabric of his jacket. Olivia Keene. The name was now the only thread left. He could not stop. Not now. He turned and limped away from the smoke, forcing his legs to move faster. Behind him, the sirens grew louder, the fire roared, and the crowd's voices blurred into one long echo. By the time he reached the bus stop on 9th Avenue, his clothes smelled of soot and fear. A bus pulled up, brakes squealing. He climbed aboard, ignoring the curious looks from passengers. He sat near the back, gripping the seat in front of him, his chest heaving. The driver asked if he was all right. Alden nodded, unable to speak. As the city rolled past the window, he watched his reflection flicker between streetlights. He no longer recognized the man staring back. This was not the quiet father who spent his life fixing engines and collecting his daughter's laughter. This was someone stripped bare, someone with nothing left to lose. At last, the bus stopped at the intersection of Howard Street. The Milwaukee Journal-Ledger building rose from the corner, modern glass, angular and cold. He walked toward the entrance, his steps slow but deliberate. Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet energy. Reporters on phones, the click of keyboards, the faint smell of coffee. The receptionist, a young man in a navy jumper, looked up as Alden approached. "Can I help you, sir?" "I need to see Olivia Keene," Alden said, his voice hoarse. "It's urgent. Father Rowan sent me." The receptionist frowned. "Father Rowan?" "Yes. St. Augustine Parish." The young man's expression softened slightly. "She's on the 3rd floor. I'll call ahead." Moments later, Alden stood in a narrow office lined with framed articles and half-empty coffee cups. A woman in her 40s sat behind a desk piled with papers. Her dark hair was tied back, and her eyes were sharp but kind. "Mr. Pierce?" she asked, standing. "Father Rowan told me you might come, though he didn't say when." Alden froze. "He called you." "Last night," she said. "Said you had something I needed to see." Alden's throat tightened. Rowan had known the danger even before Alden arrived. "He's gone," he said quietly. "The church," it exploded. Olivia's eyes widened, then hardened. "Sit down. Start from the beginning." He told her everything. Marius's warning, the fire, the USB drive, the threats, and now the explosion. Olivia listened, scribbling notes as her jaw clenched. When he finished, she leaned back, her gaze fixed on him. "Do you have the drive?" Alden handed it to her. She plugged it into her laptop, the screen's light casting faint reflections on her glasses. Files opened, spreadsheets, access logs, system data. Her fingers moved quickly across the keys. This is huge," she murmured. "If these records are genuine, Whitaker and his partners have been staging property disasters across multiple states. Fires, floods, chemical leaks, all to buy up damaged sites with insurance money. And it looks like someone in the city planning office has been approving fake safety reports." "Can you prove it?" Alden asked. "I can," she said, eyes sharp. "But it won't be easy. We'll need to move carefully. If they've already killed 2 people to hide this, they won't stop now." Alden nodded, his hands trembling. "Then what do we do?" "I'll make a copy," she said. "You keep the original. If something happens to me, you take it to the state attorney's office." She transferred the files, then looked up at him. "You're brave to come here, Mr. Pierce. But you need to disappear for a few hours. They'll be watching every move you make." "I can't leave my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "She's still in the hospital." Olivia hesitated. "Does Whitaker know you survived?" "Yes." "Then she isn't safe either," she said firmly. "If they fail to find you, they'll turn to her." Alden felt the world tilt again. "What can I do?" "I'll contact a friend at the hospital," Olivia said, already reaching for her phone. "A nurse who owes me a favor. We'll have Linnea move to a private ward under another name. You stay low until I call." Alden nodded slowly, the exhaustion finally catching up to him. "Thank you." She gave him a small, steady smile. "Don't thank me yet. If this story breaks, there'll be nowhere left for Whitaker to hide." Alden stood to leave. The newsroom beyond her office hummed with quiet urgency. He turned at the door. "Why are you helping me?" Olivia met his gaze. "Because men like you get forgotten, Mr. Pierce. You build lives for others, and no one writes your name down. It's time someone did." He left the office, the echo of her words following him into the corridor. The lift doors closed, and the city noise grew faint again. As the elevator descended, his phone vibrated. He pulled it from his pocket. Another message. This one was not a warning. It was a photograph. Linnea, still in her hospital bed, but her eyes open now, wide with fear. And standing beside her, smiling into the camera, was Whitaker. Beneath the image, 4 words appeared. "Come alone, or she dies." Alden's hand shook as he stared at the message, the image burning itself into his mind. Linnea's eyes were open this time, pleading, terrified. Whitaker's smile was calm, almost courteous, as if posing for a family portrait. The text beneath it turned Alden's blood to ice. "Come alone, or she dies." He stood frozen in the lobby of the Ledger building, the noise of reporters and phones muffled behind him. The light overhead flickered once, and for a brief second, the world narrowed to the screen in his trembling hand. His breath came shallow and fast. He wanted to shout, to run, to tear through the city until he found her. But instinct told him that every rash move would make her death certain. He slid the phone into his pocket and stepped out into the cold. The street buzzed with early traffic, buses groaning and horns echoing off the glass facades. He kept walking without direction, letting the city swallow him whole until his thoughts began to untangle. Whitaker wanted control. He always had. This was no random act of cruelty. It was leverage. Whitaker knew Alden had the original drive. The message wasn't about negotiation. It was about silence. If Alden handed over the file, Linnea might live. If he didn't, Whitaker would make sure she didn't. But Olivia was right. Giving up the drive would mean letting the truth die too. Marius, Father Rowan, they had given their lives to uncover this. Alden couldn't let that sacrifice vanish in a fire or fade into another unreported tragedy. He ducked into a narrow alley, hidden from the main road, and pulled out his phone again. His fingers moved quickly as he typed a single line to Olivia. They have Linnea. He sent me a photo. I have to go. Then he switched the phone off completely and removed the SIM card, dropping it into a storm drain. If Whitaker was tracking him, that connection needed to die. He took a deep breath, his chest tight, and reached into his coat pocket. The small USB drive still rested there like a pulse. He needed a plan. If he went to Whitaker empty-handed, Linnea would die. If he brought the real drive, he'd lose everything. There was only one solution. He had to make a copy. He looked up and saw a neon sign across the street. Netstop Cafe, printing, and internet access. The windows were fogged with condensation, the kind of place few people noticed. He crossed the road, pushed open the door, and stepped into the hum of old computers and the smell of burnt coffee. A young man behind the counter barely looked up from his phone. 1 hour pass or full day? 1 hour, Alden said. His voice cracked, but the clerk didn't notice. He paid in cash and sat at the farthest corner computer. The ancient monitor flickered to life, its fan wheezing. He inserted the USB drive and copied the entire folder to a blank stick from the display rack. Every second felt longer than the last. When the progress bar finally reached 100%, he pulled both drives out and slipped the duplicate into his shoe, under the lining. The original went back into his coat pocket. He turned to leave, but stopped. On the screen behind him, a small dialog box flashed. Transfer complete. File uploaded. His stomach dropped. He hadn't uploaded anything. He reached for the keyboard, but the system froze. A shadow fell over the screen. Mr. Pierce, a voice said softly. Alden turned. Whitaker stood behind him, immaculate as ever, his tie straight, his smile as thin as glass. 2 men in black jackets flanked him, one of them the same figure from the church. The cafe suddenly felt too small. How did you? Alden began, but Whitaker raised a hand. You didn't think I'd lose you that easily, did you? He said calmly. You're a stubborn man, Alden. Admirable, really. But it's time to stop pretending you can win. Alden clenched his fists. Where's Linnea? She's waiting, Whitaker said. Alive. For now. If you've hurt her. Whitaker's voice dropped. I wouldn't hurt my wife. But I will do whatever is necessary to protect what's mine. Including you. Alden stared at him, confusion tightening into rage. Protect me. Whitaker leaned closer, his tone low and deliberate. You think this is about inheritance money? It's bigger than that. You're the only living trustee tied to the original property titles. Without your authorization, half those deals are worthless. That's why you're still breathing. Alden's pulse quickened. You're insane. Maybe, Whitaker said with a smile. But I'm also very good at what I do. He gestured toward the door. Come on, Alden. Let's bring this to an end. Bring the file. You'll see Linnea again. Alden looked around. The clerk had disappeared into the back room. The few customers present had their eyes fixed on screens, oblivious. He was alone. He stood slowly, gripping the USB drive in his coat pocket. His mind raced. He needed a way out, some moment of leverage. As he stepped toward the door, his boot shifted slightly, and he felt the faint pressure of the hidden duplicate. Hope flickered. They led him outside to a waiting black SUV, the same one from the hospital and the fire. The door opened, and Whitaker motioned for him to get in. Where are we going? Alden asked. Whitaker's smile widened. Home. The drive felt endless. The city blurred past the tinted windows, and soon they were on the outskirts, where the highway curved toward the lake. Whitaker sat beside him, silent, tapping his fingers against his knee. The two men in front whispered occasionally into earpieces. As they turned down a dirt road lined with pines, Alden recognized the shape of the building ahead. It was a large, modern lake house, Whitaker's weekend property, secluded and surrounded by water on three sides. The sky hung low and gray, the air heavy with mist. Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of a generator echoed faintly from the basement. Whitaker gestured toward a glass-walled room overlooking the lake. Linnea sat there, her wrists tied loosely to the chair, a faint bruise on her temple. Her eyes widened when she saw her father. "Dad," she cried. Alden moved forward, but one of the guards raised a hand. Whitaker waved them off. "It's fine. Let him see her." Alden knelt beside her, tears burning behind his eyes. "Are you all right?" She nodded weakly. "He said he'd kill you if I screamed." Whitaker sighed. "Such drama, Linnea? I told you. None of this would be necessary if your father had just trusted me." Alden rose, anger burning through his fear. "You've ruined lives for money. For property. And you think trust is what you deserve." Whitaker's expression hardened. "What I deserve, Alden, is control. You spent your life working for scraps while others made the rules. I learned young that you either build the system or get buried by it. You taught Linnea how to survive, but I'm teaching her how to win. She doesn't want this." Alden snapped. "Doesn't she?" Whitaker's voice softened, but his eyes glittered with cruelty. "You raised her to believe loyalty mattered more than ambition. You made her small. I gave her the world. And she chose me." Linnea shook her head, tears streaking her face. "You're wrong." Whitaker looked at her as though she were a disappointing student. "We'll see." He turned back to Alden. "The drive, please." Alden's hand went to his coat pocket. "If I give it to you, you let her go." "Immediately," Whitaker said smoothly. Alden held his gaze, then slowly pulled the USB drive from his pocket and placed it on the table. "There. Now let her go." Whitaker smiled thinly. "Of course." He nodded to one of the men, who stepped forward and cut the ropes. Linnea's hands were free, but her eyes never left her father's. Whitaker picked up the drive and turned it in his hand. "You've done the right thing." Then, almost lazily, he dropped it into a glass of water. The small device sank to the bottom, fizzing faintly. "Now there's no more evidence," he said softly. Alden stared at the glass, his breath catching. But beneath the panic, something colder stirred inside him, a quiet satisfaction. Whitaker didn't know. The real file wasn't in that glass. It was still beneath Alden's shoe. He looked at Linnea, whose fear was now mixed with confusion. She didn't know either, but soon she would. Whitaker straightened his cuffs, smug and certain. "Now, Mr. Pierce, we can all move on." Alden met his eyes. "You're right," he said quietly. "We can." Outside, thunder rolled across the lake, deep and distant. The storm had begun. The wind howled over the lake, driving sheets of rain against the wide glass windows. Thunder rolled again, shaking the rafters like a growl from the sky itself. Whitaker glanced toward the water, his reflection flickering across the glass like a phantom. Behind him, Alden stood still, the faintest tremor in his hands hidden by the dim light. Linnea sat in silence, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had left red marks. The guards had retreated to the far end of the room, checking their phones. The illusion of calm returned, but the air buzzed with tension. Whitaker seemed relaxed now, pacing slowly before the fireplace, confident that the nightmare was finished. "I told you it didn't have to come to this," he said finally. "You could have lived comfortably, Alden. I was even willing to give you a place here after the paperwork cleared." Alden's voice was calm, but steady. "I've already lived through worse. You forget what hard years look like." Whitaker chuckled softly. "Hard years are for men who don't think ahead. I thought you'd understand that by now." A flash of lightning illuminated his face, sharp angles, a smile that never reached his eyes. The room returned to shadow. Linnea rose, her voice trembling. "Whitaker, please stop this. None of it will hold. People saw the fire, the police." "The police," Whitaker interrupted, turning toward her, "work for the same men who signed those property deals. Nobody will touch me. The files are gone, the witnesses are gone, and soon, this entire story will be just another tragedy blamed on a confused old man." He looked at Alden when he said it, his meaning unmistakable. Alden's heart hammered, but his voice stayed low. "You always thought people like me were easy to bury." Whitaker smiled faintly. "Not people like you, Alden. You." The thunder cracked again. This time, it was followed by a distant rumble not from the sky, but from the drive outside. Tires grinding against gravel. Headlights cut through the rain and swept across the window. Whitaker's head snapped toward the sound. "Who's that?" No one answered. Alden felt his pulse steady, not quicken. Maybe someone finally noticed the smoke you leave behind. Whitaker signaled to one of the guards. "Check it." The man nodded and disappeared through the front hallway. Linnea turned toward her father. "Dad, what's happening?" Alden met her eyes, the faintest flicker of reassurance crossing his face. "Just stay behind me." Moments later, the first guard returned, but not alone. Olivia Keene followed him into the room, soaked from the rain, a press badge clipped to her jacket. She held her phone high, its screen glowing. "Put down your weapons," she said. "The police are already on their way." Whitaker's expression froze for half a second before he laughed softly. "Miss Keene, you journalists really do enjoy your entrances." "I have everything," Olivia said evenly. "The copy, the network logs, the bank transactions. It's all uploading to the Ledger's server right now. Even if you shoot me, it's too late." Whitaker's smile faltered. "Copy." She nodded. "You didn't think Alden would come here empty-handed, did you?" For the first time, Whitaker's calm cracked. "You." He turned toward Alden, rage flooding his face. "You tricked me." Alden met his gaze with quiet defiance. "No, you tricked yourself. You thought an old man couldn't still fight." Whitaker lunged forward, but Linnea stepped between them. "Stop," she cried. "It's over, Whitaker." He hesitated, eyes darting between her and the USB still in Alden's coat pocket. Then, desperation flared behind his composure. "You think this changes anything? I built this network over 10 years. One story won't break it." "Maybe not one," Olivia said. "But this one will start the fall." Whitaker moved faster than anyone expected. He seized a glass paperweight from the desk and hurled it at Olivia. She ducked. It shattered against the wall. Linnea screamed. The second guard reached for his gun, but Alden, moving on instinct, grabbed the metal poker from beside the fireplace and swung. The weapon struck the man's arm, sending the gun skittering across the floor. "Run!" Alden shouted. Olivia dove for the hallway, pulling Linnea with her. Whitaker tackled Alden to the ground, his hands closing around the older man's throat. Rain lashed against the windows as they struggled, the storm outside mirroring the chaos within. "You should have died in that fire," Whitaker hissed. Alden gasped, fighting for breath. "You forgot something," he choked. Whitaker frowned. "What?" Alden's eyes flicked toward the fireplace. "Gas line." In that instant, lightning split the sky, and through the broken window, a gust of wind drove rain straight into the open flame. Sparks leapt outward. The nearest candle toppled onto the rug. A flicker became a small flame, then a spreading sheet of fire. Whitaker released him, stumbling back. "No, no, not again." Alden crawled toward Linnea and Olivia, coughing through the smoke. The remaining guard grabbed Whitaker's arm. "We have to go." But Whitaker shook him off. "The drive? Find the drive." Olivia pulled Linnea toward the door. Alden turned back once and saw Whitaker tearing through the room, overturning furniture, his elegant calm gone, replaced by panic. The flames climbed the curtains, roaring up the walls. Alden's voice broke through the chaos. "You want the drive?" he shouted. "It's right here." He held up the duplicate USB, soaked but intact, and hurled it into the fire. It vanished into the blaze. Whitaker screamed, lunging forward, but the heat drove him back. The guard bolted for the door, leaving him alone in the inferno. Alden turned and ran after Linnea and Olivia. They burst through the front door into the storm, collapsing into the mud as thunder shook the ground. Behind them, the house glowed orange against the night, every window alive with fire. Sirens wailed in the distance. Rain fell harder, hissing as it struck the burning structure. Linnea clung to her father, sobbing. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. Alden brushed her hair back gently. "Not yet." Olivia, soaked and gasping, looked toward the house. "We need to move. The police are coming." Alden nodded. "Let them come." They stood together on the wet gravel, the rain washing away the soot from their faces. Behind them, the lake house collapsed in on itself, sparks leaping into the stormy sky. When the sirens reached them, Alden turned to his daughter. "It's over," he said softly. But deep down, he knew the truth. This was only the first end. The kind of men Whitaker served did not die in a single fire. Still, as he looked at Linnea, alive, trembling, but safe, Alden felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe the storm had not come to destroy him, but to cleanse what was left of his life. The rain fell harder, but he did not flinch. He had already walked through fire. The morning after the fire, the lake was still. Charred remains of Whitaker's house rose from the shoreline like black ribs, steam rising from the wreckage. Police tape fluttered in the wind, and the faint smell of smoke lingered. Alden sat on the back of an ambulance wrapped in a gray blanket, a medic tending to a cut above his eyebrow. Linnea sat beside him, her hand clasped in his, refusing to let go. Beyond the flashing lights, officers moved in and out of the property, cataloging what little evidence remained. The storm had washed away most of the footprints, and what the rain had missed, the fire had devoured. Olivia stood nearby, speaking to a detective, her voice low but unwavering. She had already uploaded the files to the newspaper's encrypted server. Whitaker's network could no longer hide. The detective approached Alden. "Mr. Pierce," he said gently, "we've recovered 2 bodies from the site. One matches the description of a hired guard. The other," he paused, "we believe it's Whitaker." Linnea gasped, her grip tightening. Alden looked up, eyes hollow. "Believe." The fire burned hot. "We'll confirm through dental records," the detective said. "We'll need both of you to come in for statements once the hospital clears you." Alden nodded. "You'll have mine." When the officer left, Linnea turned toward her father, her voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't know what he was doing. I swear to you I didn't." Alden looked at her face, drawn, tear-streaked, but honest. "I know," he said quietly. "You were trying to keep the pieces of your life together. He just made you believe you couldn't without him." Her tears fell freely now. "He told me you were getting sick, that you needed supervision. I thought he was helping. I didn't see what was happening until the night of the fire." Alden took her hand. "You don't have to explain, Linnea. Love makes fools of all of us. What matters is that you're here." She leaned against him, weeping softly. He held her, the way he used to when she was a child, back when the world was simpler and promises meant something. Olivia approached them a few minutes later. "The files are safe," she said. "My editor verified everything. The story goes live at noon." Alden looked up. "Will it be enough?" Olivia nodded slowly. "It's the start of something. Whitaker's partners, the shell companies, the city officials, they'll face investigations. It won't happen overnight, but their empire will burn the way his house did." Linnea swallowed hard. "And us?" Olivia gave a faint smile. "You'll have to rebuild too. But this time, you won't do it alone." The wind swept across the lake, carrying the smell of damp ash. Alden watched the rising sun reflect on the water, golden and fragile. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "if justice really makes up for everything we lose?" Olivia's gaze softened. "No," she said, "but it makes what we've lost mean something." They stood together in silence. A few meters away, an officer marked evidence in the mud. Among it, a half-melted metal cross, the kind Father Rowan used to wear. Alden's eyes lingered on it, a dull gleam against the scorched ground. Later that morning, Alden and Linnea rode with Olivia back into the city. The streets looked washed clean by the storm, but Alden knew better. Beneath the calm surface, shadows still moved. Power like Whitaker's did not vanish. It waited, regrew, adapted. Still, the truth had escaped, and that was a wound money could not heal. Olivia dropped them at the steps of Mercy General. "You should both rest," she said. "I'll contact you once the first story runs." Alden nodded. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything." She gave a small smile. "You did the hard part, Mr. Pierce. You kept standing." As the car pulled away, Linnea turned to her father. "What happens now?" He looked up at the hospital windows, where the world went on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Now," he said, "we live. Quietly, honestly. That's more than men like Whitaker ever understood." They entered the hospital together. Reporters had already begun gathering outside. The Ledger's online article was spreading, its headline bold. "City Fraud Network Exposed. Real Estate Scandal Linked to Deadly Fires." Alden ignored the cameras and the murmured questions. He only wanted rest. A nurse recognized him and guided them to a small room away from the commotion. Linnea lay on the bed, exhausted, while Alden sat in the chair beside her. For the first time in weeks, the silence was kind. The only sound was the hum of machines and the rhythm of their breathing. "Dad," Linnea whispered, her eyes half closed. "What will you do after this?" Alden looked out the window. The clouds were breaking apart, letting sunlight spill through. "I don't know. Maybe fix something again. Maybe an engine. Maybe myself." She smiled faintly. "You still fix things better than anyone." He chuckled, the sound rough but genuine. "Old habits." She reached for his hand. "You saved me." Alden looked at her and shook his head. "No, Linnea. We saved each other." Outside, the city began to stir again, unaware that its foundations had quietly shifted. Somewhere across town, Olivia sat in her newsroom as the story exploded across every screen. The names of the corrupt, the trail of bribes, the evidence Alden had protected, it was all there for the world to see. By afternoon, the first arrests began. By nightfall, the network that had swallowed lives for profit started to crumble. But Alden didn't watch the news. He stayed beside his daughter, his rough hands resting over hers, feeling the steady warmth of her pulse. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to close his eyes, not in exhaustion, but in peace. He had walked through fire, through betrayal, through the ruins of his faith. And in the ashes, he had found something worth saving. As dusk fell over Milwaukee, the hospital lights glowed softly, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang again. This time, they rang for the living. 2 weeks later, the sky over Milwaukee carried the kind of soft blue that only follows long rain. The city was quieter now. The headlines had shifted from scandal to recovery, from death to accountability. Faces once hidden behind boardroom glass now stared from the front pages, their empires unraveled thread by thread. Alden read none of it. He spent his mornings walking with Linnea through the small park behind Mercy General, each step slow but steady, the world feeling new in a way he had not known in years. The burns on Linnea's hands were healing. She still startled at loud noises, still woke some nights whispering Whitaker's name as if to banish him from her dreams. But there was life returning to her face. Alden saw it in the way she watched the light move through the trees. They spoke little of the past. Silence had become their peace. That morning, a nurse found Alden by the hospital garden and handed him a brown envelope. "Delivered by courier," she said. "No sender listed." He turned it over in his hands. The writing on the front was neat and deliberate. For Alden Pierce, to be opened alone. He sat on a bench beneath the elm trees and opened it carefully. Inside were 2 items, a short letter and a small flash drive. The letter was typed and signed, but he recognized the voice immediately. It was Olivia's. "Alden, the files you gave me have led to wider investigations. The federal task force has confirmed multiple connections beyond Milwaukee. Some of Whitaker's partners have fled, others are negotiating deals. You will be contacted as a witness soon, but I thought you should know, your testimony has already changed things. Rowan's name has been cleared. Marius's data is now part of a federal record. They won't be forgotten. On this drive, you'll find something else. Your house, the one you sold before Whitaker entered your life. It was seized from a shell company under his control. The title is back in your name. It's yours, Alden. Go home." Oh, Alden read it twice, then sat still for a long time. The wind stirred the trees. He slipped the flash drive into his pocket and looked across the garden. Linnea was sitting by the fountain, sketching in a small notebook, her hair tied loosely back. For the first time in years, her face looked free. That afternoon, they left the hospital together. The house sat at the edge of the old neighborhood, near the canal where Alden had worked as a young man. Its windows were dusty, its garden overgrown, but the bones of it were the same. When he pushed open the door, the familiar creak in the floorboard by the threshold greeted him like an old friend. Linnea wandered through the empty rooms in silence. "I remember this place," she said softly. "The Christmas lights. The smell of coffee in the morning." Alden smiled. "I thought I'd lost it forever." "You didn't lose it," she said, turning to him. "It waited for you." They spent the next days cleaning. Linnea painted the kitchen while Alden repaired the porch steps. Neighbors stopped by to offer food and quiet congratulations. Some recognized his name from the news, others only from the years when he had fixed their cars for a bottle of lemonade and a thank you. Each night, they sat by the old radio he had rebuilt, listening to the distant murmur of the lake. The house felt alive again. One evening, as dusk fell, Linnea brought out a small wooden box. I found this in the attic, she said, setting it on the table. Inside were old photos. Linnea as a child on a bicycle, her mother smiling faintly beside her, Alden covered in engine grease, holding a wrench like a trophy. She traced her finger along the edge of one photo. I used to think you were indestructible, she said quietly. Alden chuckled. Turns out I'm just too stubborn to fall apart completely. Her eyes filled, but she smiled. I don't deserve you. You're my daughter, he said simply. That's all that matters. She leaned against his shoulder. The silence between them was no longer painful. It was home. Later that night, when Linnea had gone to bed, Alden sat alone on the porch. The stars shimmered faintly through the haze of city light. He took out a pen and a notebook and began to write. Not for newspapers, not for courts, but for himself. If anyone ever reads this, know that truth is a long road. It takes from you more than it gives at first, and you walk most of it alone. But somewhere along the way, the world becomes clearer. You see who people are, not by their promises, but by what they're willing to risk for others. I've lost friends, but I've found peace. That's enough for any man. Tell them I wasn't a hero. I was just a father who refused to look away. He set the pen down and looked toward the horizon. The faint echo of church bells drifted across the water, the same sound that had filled his youth, steady and forgiving. Inside, Linnea stirred in her sleep, safe in the house he had fought to reclaim. The scars on their hearts would fade slowly, but they were alive to feel them heal. Alden leaned back, the chair creaking beneath him, and closed his eyes. The night air was cool, the first stars clear. He whispered into the quiet, "It's over." And somewhere in the distance, as if the world itself answered, the wind shifted through the trees, soft, certain, carrying the peace of a man who had finally come home. If this story moved you, don't let it fade away. Share Alden's journey with someone who still believes in quiet strength, forgiveness, and second chances. Hit like if you felt the heartbreak and hope. Leave a comment for Alden and Linnea. What would you have done in his place? And if you want more stories of redemption, courage, and truth that hits the heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every story here reminds us, it's never too late to fight for what's right, and it's never too late to come home.